The truth about India's GDP nobody tells you.
Again, the Indian economy has recorded a path-breaking GDP.
India's GDP numbers are out and it looks like Diwali never ended.
India's GDP just crossed $4 trillion. News channels are celebrating and politicians are calling it a historic milestone. But here's the uncomfortable truth. GDP can rise even when your life gets harder. And in India's case, that's exactly what's happening. Because the number that defines our nation doesn't actually measure the life you live. Just ask Ritu, a 34-year-old homemaker in Jaipur. She manages her kids, her elderly mother-in-law, cooking and cleaning, a full-time job without weekends. But according to GDP, Ritu contributes nothing to the economy. Absolute zero. And this is where the story begins to break. In the next few minutes, you'll understand why GDP gives a distorted picture of India and why the factors that actually decide your quality of life barely appear in this famous number. Before we go further, remember this. GDP is simply the value of things we produce and sell, not what we feel. Not whether the money reached your home, not whether your life improved, and that difference between production and reality is where India's story gets shocking. Every morning, crores of women like Ritu wake up before sunrise, running the household like a COO, but GDP counts all of this as zero economic value. A global economic summary from the IMF explains that GDP ignores any activity that isn't bought or sold, meaning a huge part of India's backbone simply vanishes from measurement, and the impact is everywhere. India's female labor participation is among the lowest globally, according to the World Bank, partly because this invisible work never gets counted, valued, or recognized. But here's the twist. Studies in India show that when more women take up formal jobs, families naturally shift towards convenience. More restaurant trips, more ready-to-eat meals, more spending outside the home. A 2023 behavioral study even found that rising restaurant visits were linked to more women working outside home, busier lifestyles, and higher disposable income. But India still cooks at home. According to Swiggy's report of 2024, the average Indian eats only about 5 meals a month that aren't home cooked. So the economy benefits from all the unpaid labor, but because no money moves, GDP treats it as zero. Two families can create the same value. One pays for it. GDP rises, one does it at home. GDP stays flat. India appears poorer, not because we work less, but because so much of our real work never enters the measurement system. But this invisibility is nothing compared to what comes next. Because in India, even bad quality can increase GDP. A World Bank insight puts it clearly. GDP rewards activity, not quality. Meaning, build a bad road, GDP goes up. It breaks next monsoon, repair it. GDP goes up again. Poor construction, endless contracts, endless GDP. If a well-built highway lasts 15 years, GDP grows once. If a poorly built one needs repairs every year, GDP grows 15 times. But when news anchors celebrate rising GDP, do they ask whether the road stayed intact? And this isn't theory. India sees this cycle every year. The Palivarattum flyover in Kochi, inaugurated in October 2016, shut down in May 2019, demolished in September 2020, reopened in March 7, 2021. Bengaluru's potholes return every monsoon. The same roads get dug, patched, and dug again. And in Chhattisgarh, a 52-kilometer PWD road was so poorly built that police filed FIRs after an investigation exposed massive defects. One road, many repairs, one mistake, many budgets, GDP rises, but the road never improves. It's like a student who keeps failing an exam and the school celebrates because they collected multiple re-exam fees. We reward the redo, not the quality. But here's where the story takes a surprising turn. Because this flaw in GDP isn't new. The man who created GDP didn't believe in it. Let me take you back in time. It's 1934. America is deep in the Great Depression. Economist Simon Kuznets walks into the US Congress with a brand new measurement system, the foundation of what we now call GDP. Everyone expects him to present it as the ultimate economic scorecard, but instead, he wants them. He tells lawmakers, don't mistake activity for progress. Don't erase the unpaid work that keeps households running. Don't assume rising income means rising well-being, and never hide inequality behind one national number. Then he drops a line that economists still repeat: the welfare of a nation can scarcely be inferred from a measure of national income. The creator of GDP literally told the world, don't use this number to judge people's lives. But here's the irony. 90 years later, we are doing the exact opposite. So, GDP keeps rising, but households like Ritu's still do jugaad with their monthly budget, stretching every rupee while prices keep jumping. And this gap between economic activity and actual life only gets wider from here. GDP is basically the revenue of the entire country. It says nothing about profits, sustainability, household wealth, financial strength. The World Inequality Lab shows that the top 10% now hold more than 70% of India's wealth. But that's only the surface. Look at what happened in just 10 years. Back in 2014, India had around 70 billionaires. By 2018, that number had doubled to 131. By 2020, it reached 169, then 249 in 2022, a jump to 271 in 2024. And by 2025, India had 284 billionaires, almost 4 times the count of a decade earlier. According to an Oxfam article, their combined wealth didn't just rise, it grew 10 times over the same decade. And during the pandemic alone, a period when ordinary families were cutting expenses and struggling with job losses, India's billionaire wealth shot up 121%, increasing by the equivalent of 3,600 crore rupees per day. Now compare that with the rest of India. The bottom 50% own roughly 3% of the wealth pie. The richest 1% hold over 40%, and it gets stranger from here. GDP itself isn't even a measurement, it's an estimate. Most Indians don't realize the number here. India grew 8.2% this quarter. You imagine it's measured like temperature. It's not. It's modeled or estimated like weather predictions. Why? Because India has one of the world's largest informal economies. Millions of truck drivers, tailors, carpenters, freelancers, shopkeepers. Most don't maintain formal accounts. IMF economists explain that in such countries, GDP is reconstructed from surveys, samples, assumptions, and that's why strange things happen. Change the base year, GDP jumps. Change the formula, growth shifts by 1 to 2% overnight. Agriculture, small manufacturing, built on sample surveys. It's like trying to grade a class when half of the students didn't submit their answer sheet. You don't measure, you estimate. GDP isn't a thermometer. It's an educated guess based on many assumptions and survey data. India is now the world's 4th largest economy. Sounds massive. Until you divide that GDP by 1.46 billion people, and suddenly our per capita GDP becomes around $2,800, which is among the lowest for major economies. Smaller nations with 1/50th of our population look richer because their economic pie is shared among fewer people, like Luxembourg, Singapore, Ireland, Qatar, and many more. World Inequality Lab research shows a deepening divide between the top 1% and 10%, which is pulling away faster than ever. GDP averages everything, but the average doesn't represent the typical Indian. It's like mixing the salary of Mukesh Ambani with Ritu's household income and calling it average. India is not just one economy, it's many. Telangana's per capita income is close to 4 lakh rupees. Bihar's is just 60,000 rupees. That's a 7 times difference. Yet, both states get merged into the same national GDP. Painting a false picture of uniform progress. And here's a paradox nobody talks about. If a process has 5 middlemen, GDP goes up. If technology removes them, GDP falls. UPI proved this perfectly. By killing transaction fees and inefficiencies, UPI increased national productivity but reduced the GDP contribution of payment companies. A Harvard commentary explains, GDP can't tell the difference between smart efficiency and wasteful complexity. GDP hates simplicity. Regardless of whether people benefit from it, but what people don't love is rising prices. And this is where GDP creates its most dangerous illusion. Because even if the economy is booming on paper, inflation can quietly erase that growth in your real life. Let's understand it the way every Indian family does. Last year, Ritu spent 10,000 rupees on groceries. This year, the same items cost 12,000 rupees. She didn't buy more, prices just went up. Now imagine her husband's salary also rose by 2000 rupees. On paper, that salary looks like growth, but nothing really changed. That's the idea behind the formula. Real GDP is equal to nominal GDP minus inflation. So if inflation is measured too low, real GDP looks bigger than people's actual experience. And that's exactly what happened with India's recent 8.2% GDP figure. Business Standard noted India's recent GDP figure was boosted by a low deflator. HSBC told the Economic Times that growth may be overstated by 0.8 to 1.5%. New Indian Express highlighted that weak nominal GDP suggests real activity isn't matching the hype, so GDP may look like it's flying, but households like Ritu's still feel every price rise in the groceries, school fees, rent. Because when inflation is underestimated, the country grows on paper, not in real life. And when prices rise faster than incomes, the impact isn't equal. Ordinary families feel the squeeze, while those at the top barely notice it. That's the part most Indians never hear. So what should India really measure? If GDP hides unpaid work, rewards poor quality, ignores profit and household wealth, depends on guesswork, misreads inflation, and smooths over inequality and regional gaps, then it's clear. GDP is not the report card of Indians. It is only the report card of Indian production. That's why millions don't feel richer even when the GDP graph looks like a rocket. Real progress needs real metrics like median household income, job quality and security, health safety nets, education outcomes, time saved, women's work participation, bottom 40% income growth, district level development, environmental health, and life satisfaction. Countries like Denmark, Finland, and New Zealand already do this, pairing GDP growth with well being. Growth matters, but only when people feel it. So, the next time you see a big GDP number flashing on TV, ask, did this number really improve the life of an average Indian, or did you just celebrate it because it looked good on screen? Because GDP can make a country look rich. India doesn't have to choose between growth and well-being. We can and must chase both. A strong economy with weak citizens isn't progress. A strong nation is one where prosperity is felt, not just measured.